to Leading the Mosaic World podcast. My guest today is Steve Salvin, CEO of Aiimi, a technology company that specializes in data, digital, and AI. Steve studied computation at the University of Manchester. He has worked at different consulting firms such as EDS and PwC, been Vice President of EMEA for OpenText and MicroStrategy. He's also the founder of 3 startups, all in technology, and in particular around data. Through Aiimi, his focus is in helping organizations gain extra value from the data they captured. Steve, thank you for being my guest today.
Hi, Susan. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
It's my delight to have you. Can I start off by asking you, around when and where were you born?
Sure. I was born in 1969 in a place called Darwen, which is near Blackburn in Lancashire. I lived there for 11 years and then moved to Telford in Shropshire. I grew up there, went to high school, and then moved to Manchester, where I studied, as you said earlier. And eventually I got my first job in Milton Keynes. And whilst I've tried to escape a few times, this has now become my home. So I'm a true MKer now.
How long have you been in Milton Keynes for? I've been here for going on 20 years now, and I absolutely love Milton Keynes. I don't know why anyone would want to escape.
No, I got my first job in 1990. So, how many years is that? 33 years?
About 33 years, yes.
Yeah. So, and like you, it's home. I'm very proud of it. I absolutely love being here. And every time I drive or go somewhere else, I count my blessings that home is Milton Keynes.
I mean, I must say, I have that as well, that anywhere I travel to in the world, no matter how much I enjoy it, I always have a big smile on my face when I drive back into Milton Keynes, which I think is a great thing for the place where you live and work.
Yeah, I think everyone who lives here is very proud of it, proud of the city, the environment, the diversity, the technology, the red ways. There's so many cool things. We know that people like to take the mick out of concrete cows, but they don't really know how great it is, and we all end up just chuckling away because it is so cool.
Yeah, I wrote a book on Milton Keynes a number of years back, and I remember people jokingly saying to me, I shouldn't tell people about it, they'll all want to come here.
Exactly, yeah, that's the sentiment, for sure.
Yeah. But before you came to Milton Keynes, you were, dare I say, very much a northerner. And I'm curious to know, what was it like for you growing up in the north of England?
Yeah, like I say, Blackburn, it was an interesting time. I guess in my school, it was about 50% Asian, 50% white. It's kind of normal to me because that's what it was. Probably didn't quite realise how mixed it was until I actually moved to Telford in Shropshire. But I came from a poor family. My father was ex-forces. My mum ended up leaving us when we were quite young and was raised by my dad, and I'm one of 3. And we lived in a poor area in a council house. He was a carpet fitter by trade. So it was a relatively meagre upbringing. It was quite a poor background, and I think in quite difficult conditions. I know shortly after I left Blackburn, my school was demolished, so it wasn't a particular great institution.
But here you are today, leading a company of your own after all the other things. And I'm curious to know, because now you are the chief executive of Aiimi, how did your career journey bring you to the place from the background you have to leading a company of your own?
To be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure about that. I don't often take much time to reflect on that and wonder. I think maybe that's something I'll do later on. I've always found myself to be quite driven in some of the kind of psychometric testing and analysis that you end up doing as a leader. I know that some of my drivers are around wanting things to be perfect is one of them. So I have a tendency to want to complete things and finish them to a high standard, sometimes too high. And I also need to be liked. I need to be patted on the back and told I'm doing a great job. And where that's manifested itself in my work career is working with customers. I found myself wanting to deliver a high product to them, and I've needed them to tell me I've done a great job at the end of it. And so those two drivers have kind of worked hand in glove. I think that's more to do with who I am and where I've got to than anything about, how I came into this world.
Yeah, I mean, it would be very easy for me to immediately think, is that about having an imposter syndrome, which we talk a lot about, whereby you think, I don't so much belong, but I have to. So I therefore have to prove myself. But you're saying that's more just your basic nature, who you are as a person.
Yeah, that is true. When I did my first startup when I was 27, and some people would call that foolish, but I just saw an opportunity. I had no ambition to create some new empire. There was an opportunity, I took it, I worked hard. I found that I was pleasing the customer by doing that, and I was actually beating other larger companies around me. I'd come from that big company background and felt actually doing it in my way on my own was better. So I didn't feel any pressure. But the one thing that you did make me feel, and it probably is worth sharing, is I've taken my career in two particular companies to the vice president, where I've been reporting to the president or the CEO of those organizations. And I have worked in management teams with lots of other very senior executives. And in both cases, I've found myself feeling quite uncomfortable, where I can recognize the skills, some of the diplomacy, political, some of the clever skills that are required in those management teams. But I personally haven't felt that to me. And in some respects, I wanted to get back to working with teams, working with customers, selling and delivering products and services. That's really where my passion is. So, I haven't wanted to stay at the top in those circles because it didn't really feel me. And if I had have done, I felt then probably I would have felt that imposter syndrome at that point. But my tactic was to leave and go off and do something that I felt passionate about.
That sounds like a wise move, and I dare say people have gained from that, because as you said, you started a number of companies. And I'm just curious with that, would you say it takes to be successful with a startup?
I would say for me is to have a very clear belief in something, a clear vision of what you want to do. And you need to pick a team around you that are bought into that vision, that share your passion, that kind of want to go all in with you to make it happen. And then I would say to put the blinkers on and really focus on what you want to achieve and what you want to do. I constantly, I have a board now. We have advisors, we have non-execs. All through life, you're going to get people with lots of opinions. I think to ignore all those opinions and not to have them, I think would blind you. But to be polarized by every opinion that you hear would also frustrate you and probably prevent you from carrying on. So somehow you've got to strike that tricky balance of putting your head up, deciding what you want to do, and then getting on with it. But I truly believe one of the biggest things for me is putting the blinkers on and just keep going, keep believing, keep going. The people around you want to feel that energy. They want to feel that sense of direction, and they'll come with you if it feels right.
That sounds great. And I was sort of making notes as you were talking, and when you spoke about the blinders, having advisors, I almost think it's something about being able to listen to what people have to say, but knowing yourself, the sense of purpose, what you're trying to achieve enough, and trusting your instincts and who you are enough to be able to say, yes, that makes sense, I'll take that. But no, that doesn't apply. That's not relevant to these circumstances.
Do you know, that's such a good point. Pretty much everything in these big decisions that you're going to make, they feel like Brexit. There's very, very rarely a middle ground. You have to take either one route or another, and it can be very, very tricky. But throughout my career, I have kept in touch and kept hold of mentors that I feel have given me good advice, that have believed in me and seen something that others haven't, but have also got some experience that I want to continue to tap into. I've also continued to be part of networking groups, and from time to time I've also had a personal counsellor, somebody that I can go to and talk to about challenges that I might be facing and get some independent view of that. But to come back to your point, Susan, the hard decision is nearly always what your gut instinct tells you after listening to everyone. You've got to trust that and go with it. And I often say to leaders in Aiimi to be the Jose Mourinho of football, do it your way, listen to everyone, but then go into the battle, go into the fight, doing it the way that you believe, because it's okay to fail, but fail in the tactics and the game plan that you had. Don't fail because you listened to someone and you did something that you didn't actually believe in, because that's an awful place to be.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on there. And there's so many things with that, but one of the things that specifically stood out for me is having mentors and supporters and all that believe in you and what you're doing. I'm looking at the moment at, I need someone in that space. And actually, I was thinking about it this morning. I don't care how good you are. I already know if whoever I talk to will be good, but you need to believe in me, believe in what I do and be excited by it.
That's right. 100%.
Yeah, because then I'm thinking about Aiimi. You describe Aiimi's office as a place that screams, this is a fun, cool place to be, that is relaxed and doesn't take itself too serious. I've been to the offices and I've seen some of that with the putting area for golf. I realised how out of practice I am. The tennis table and all others, but I'd love you to just give a description of Aiimi for the benefit of anyone who hasn't yet been to the office. What's it like for people when they walk through the doors?
Sure. Before we moved to Milton Keynes, we used to be based in London, in Tooley Street, and we were always company of begging and borrowing various other people's spaces. And we felt one day it'd be nice to have our own front door, our own kind of name on the door, feel like we'd kind of arrived. But we wanted to do that when we could afford it at the right time, because we didn't want to have kind of an ego thing that was going to cost us too much money. Eventually we decided that we would move to Milton Keynes. And one of the things that inspired us was actually a local hotel that was opposite us at the time called Citizen M. It was Citizen M Hotel on Southwark Street, and it was a kind of new generation of self-serve hotels. You walk through the door, it didn't have a reception. There wasn't that kind of stuffy 3 or 4 people sitting there to check you in. Instead, you walked into an area where there was a counter, a square counter, and in the morning it was serving coffee, the smell of coffee, there was fresh fruit, baguettes, croissants, things like that. You walked into this very welcoming area, and then dotted all around it were places to sit and work. Some were kind of hot desking areas, some were soft seating, some were quiet little booths. There was a little courtyard with trees in it, so you could almost feel like you were outside. And we often worked there. People, they encouraged businesses like us to come and work, because we'd sit there and drink coffee and eat all day. And then in the evening, the vibe would turn more into fun. We'd start hearing a bit of music, maybe a few drinks later in the evening. And so we wanted a similar thing to that. Instead of having a reception, we wanted a concierge. So as you know, Devesh is our corporate concierge. Want someone that you can go and they will help you, support you how to get to the place, find who you want to meet, make sure you've got a coffee. When you walk into our space, it's that same vibe. There's people there, there's a smile on their face, they're excited to see you. We've got a light board, as you'll know, where any new people who are coming, we put their names up on the board. They feel welcome when they come. They know that we're expecting them. They can see we're excited to see them. There's a pot of coffee. Even if we weren't there, you could just walk over and grab yourself a fresh cup. And you can choose various different places to go and sit. We've got the outside balcony We've got the soft seating. So we've tried to recreate that vibe that's fun, relaxed, warm, engaging, and really try and avoid something that's too corporate-y.
And I think you've done a good job in creating that environment. I know that you have a lot of hybrid working with people working from home a lot. Some people would say, though, does any work get done?
Yeah, that is a fair question. It is tricky, right? You can walk into the office one day and you can't move; it's heaving. You walk in another day, you think nobody works in that place. So it is quite different. But prior to lockdown, we had a work from anywhere mentality. We actually used to say we don't care where you work, and quite often people will come to the office 2 or 3 days a week, work from home, typically on a Monday and a Friday. People that were working on customers would tend to work with customers on site for a period of time, and after a while, when the trust had been formed, they could start to work a little bit more flexible. And we did have people even then working in holiday homes or maybe going to see relatives abroad and working from there. So we were always flexible. COVID came along and really kind of accelerated everyone to the same position as us, maybe even a bit further on in terms of we got used to working from home. We're now in a bit of a resetting cycle where people are starting to learn that actually it is fun again to come back. But I want them to come back on their terms, come back because it's fun, come back because they can do things and collaborate in a way that they don't get at home. But, it's definitely the work gets done. And I feel the more we empower people, the more we trust people to make the right decisions, work in the right places, and the focus on keeping customers happy is number one. If we can trust people to do that, then I feel not only are they super happy with it, they're motivated by it, but there's also, you start getting this degree of they don't want them to abuse that or let it down. And I think 99% of the time we get more back, we get more work done, our customers are even happier because they're happy. And I genuinely believe that.
Yeah. And I guess that also in some ways goes back to that belief of, this is having that clear purpose, recruiting people that buy into it, and I guess people that are good at what they do, and trusting them to get their jobs done. I guess it feeds into that as well.
Yeah. Yes, it does. I think when people come to Aiimi, that you're right, they see this nice office, they see the smiles and the nice people, and suddenly realise actually there's a really nice bunch of people there. But in a short while after that, you start also realising they're very good at what they do. This is a smart team of people, and the company is growing at nearly 40% every year. We're nearly doubling every 2 years. This is a high-performing team that has, some of the best customer names that you could ever hope for, doing some work that's right at the edge of technology. And so whilst we want it to be fun and engaging, we also want to win. So, and I think that, people generally want to be part of a winning team. They want to be in a safe environment and they want to be somewhere where we can get the best out of them. But it's still important to be going somewhere and have a purpose.
Yeah. Just a couple of things in terms of that way of working, which to me is great. I know that people express two key concerns outside of the concern that some people have that, people don't work from home. I'll put that aside because if you trust people and do all the things that you outlined, that's a non-issue. But some people say that when people aren't together, you lose the creativity, the ability to just go up to someone and say, how do you do this? Or what do you think about this? And the second part of that is that specifically for young workers, people that have just come into the workplace, that they miss the opportunity of being able to go to a more senior person and get the nurturing and support that you get, or that you're said to get if everyone is in the office at the same time. Don't know what your thinking is on that.
Yeah, okay. The lockdown period did force us into something that we previously thought was impossible. the fact that I can now have a consultation with my GP online, and I can book my appointments and see my medical records on my mobile phone, that was previously thought of impossible. It will never happen. So we've definitely pushed the boundaries, and we've learned a different way. Collaboration, new ideas, new innovation hasn't stopped in those 2 or 3 years. If it's anything, it's got greater. And we did learn new digital ways of doing things that in some respects are better. That said, I do take your point. We used to come and work together for a reason, and collaboration is easier, I think, especially when you're working in teams and you're innovating new ideas. And so for those types of sessions, those types of engagements, I do think there's some advantages of being physically together. But we've also, in that same period, become more aware of, people's challenges in the workplace. And we've become more accepting of that. And some of those digital ways of working means that we can all be a happier team. Picking up on your younger people, I said to you, we haven't mandated people to come in X amount of days, and we've tried to be very flexible and empower people to make the right decisions. We have, however, asked graduates that have just graduated university, come into us for the first time, that they do spend the first 3 months in the office full time. And we hired 7 apprentices last year, and through some lessons learned with them, we've asked them to come in for 6 months, specifically to do some of the things that you mentioned, which is to be around, to be able to ask questions, to be able to get advice quick. But also, I think just as important as that, to actually just observe more senior people and how they behave, and the way they conduct themselves in meetings and in difficult situations. I think there's an awful lot they can learn just from being around those people that they otherwise wouldn't get on Zoom.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in there. And so it does say, yes, the hybrid working from anywhere is great, but you've developed a way of considering those people that might need that support in the early stages. So let them develop, let them learn from others, and then let them become more flexible over time.
Right. That's right. Yeah, that's all part of that. Yeah, you gain the trust, understand the boundaries, start working with customers, see the values being lived, see the customers being happy and them accepting that and responding to that. Then I think slowly people will start to be able to work and make those decisions for themselves. As you know, in Aiimi, we have some people that will never come to the office, or potentially may only come once in a blue moon. That's one extreme, all the way to we've got people that want to be there 5 days a week. I found it very difficult to write a policy that says this is what everyone should do. So that's our story. I think every senior executive, every leader that I meet, whether it's another company in Milton Keynes or it's one of our customers, they always want to sit and have this conversation because everyone's facing the same challenge.
That's good. I'm going to be setting up some conversations about that and other things. So I will let you know about that as an aside from this. But then back to the core of the conversation, what you do as a business with all these highly capable people, it's technology. It'd be nice to explain in your words what Aiimi does.
Sure. So we describe Aiimi as a technology company that specialises in data, digital and AI. So it's probably best if I just pick those 3 things up. Data is lots of things to lots of people, but we work for large organisations, the likes of Rolls-Royce, Jaguar Land Rover, Anglian Water, for example. They've typically got hundreds of corporate systems that do lots of specialist things, and they've got petabytes of data that lives in different formats across all of those different systems. And they've been operating for decades. They've been acquiring companies and growing. And you imagine the pace of technology over the years, those data structures and systems have evolved. And so it's a very complex data landscape that they've got. And they've typically got tens of thousands of employees that are all trying to innovate, reinvent, evolve, change, service their customers, build the next jet engine or the next car. And so the world is waking up to data is such an important commodity. It's potentially the most valuable commodity that they've got. And we're starting to find innovative ways of being able to mine that information, ask questions of that, because most of the answers to the questions that they've got are actually hidden somewhere in the data they've got. The challenge is, how do we do something with it so that we can transform that in a way that we can start mining it and ask questions of it? So that's the data piece. From a digital, I talked earlier about my GP and being able to have an online consultation and book an appointment or see my medical records. That really is a great example of digital. Instead of having an in-person meeting and a paper prescription and go into the pharmacy, I can now do all of that through my mobile phone. And so what we've seen, again, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, is we've been forced to innovate. People have been forced to consider, how can we do things in a more digital way? How can we provide an experience where our employees or our customers can use their mobile phones to do something that previously that they had to do in person? And so the demand for digital skills is high. People want to create products quickly. They want to take them to market quickly. And so the pace of change is fast. And so we're having to evolve some new techniques to be able to bring that to life. And then the last one is AI. And I think AI is probably the more interesting one, because it's different things to different people. I told you earlier, I graduated in 90. Believe it or not, in Manchester, I did an AI module in my course. So over 30 years ago, I was studying that. And now you can't seem to move without something being powered by AI. I'm sure there's a can opener out there somewhere that's got AI technology in it. I remember probably 10 years or so ago, everything was smart, wasn't it? You had smart TVs, smart toasters, and now we have AI-powered things. In reality, for me, the foundations of artificial intelligence is maths. If you go back to your maths days, looking at statistical models, you were able to build algorithms that were able to say, does this set of numbers here, how does that correlate to this set of numbers? Is it a good match? Is it a terrible match? And am I able to identify anomalies in that data? So things that look odd. And so we're talking about a mathematical formula, an algorithm that was capable of doing that. And in reality, all we've done is we've applied those techniques to pictures and to numbers and to letters. We've been able to now use those models to be able to spot patterns. When it comes to AI, and I think to bring that a human element to it, we as humans, we're good at reading. We can spot letters, we can spot numbers, we can spot pixels or images. And what we've done is we've used those models and we've trained them to be able to spot letters, numbers, and pixels as well. And we've been able to spot patterns of pixels so we can tell if it's a dog or a cat or a house or a car. The model is clever, but it needs to have some kind of training. It needs to have some kind of human interaction where we've gone, that pattern that you've just spotted there is a wheel on a car, or is a window on a house, or is a cat or a particular type of cat. And ultimately, when we've trained a model or we've created one, it becomes kind of better than human performance at being able to do that really quickly across millions and millions of things at the same time. I think the really cool thing about AI is some of the applications that we've now started to apply it to. And one that sprang to mind was around the ability to identify potential diseases or illnesses in people, but just bringing that down to maths again, because these models don't have a conscience. They don't have some capability of turning rogue and becoming sexist or racist or nasty. These models are the mathematical algorithms and they're as good as the training and they're as good as the data that's been given them. But, to bring that to life with the health, there was a story around consultants that were looking at cancer in lung cells. And basically over many, many years, there were lots of vials, pictures of cells, and they'd been labelled with ultimately what had happened to that patient. Did they become sick? To what level? What was the ultimate outcome? And those pictures of those cells with the outcome were loaded into a model. They were able to identify different patterns and be able to detect that cells with this particular pattern led to that outcome. So there's some cleverness in a mathematical model, but there's also some collaboration with a subject matter expert that ultimately leads to creating something that's very powerful. So that means that you can come along, give a sample, and the model can tell you what your propensity to be ill or not is. So very, very clever, but I think we've got to be careful of some of the extremes that are out there with what AI is and really how powerful it is.
That's a great explanation. Different things you do. But then focusing on the AI, I think that's a great explanation, highlighting something positive. Everyone's talking about AI these days, most especially since we've had ChatGPT come out. And I'm just thinking, is it the best thing since sliced bread? Or is this a threat to our very humanity? Or something in between?
Yeah. It reminds me, that question, of something I'd said earlier about Brexit. Is it one extreme or the other? And I do think you're right. It's something in between, but journalists tend to like to talk about it's going to change the world and make us all rich and famous, or it's going to be doom and gloom. And we hear those two extremes a lot. But I do think it's somewhere in the middle. And I'm definitely on the side of this is very exciting and something that we should all be learning about and embracing. But specifically on ChatGPT, for me, ChatGPT is a great innovation. I think what it's done is it's made the masses, lots and lots of people, become aware of what AI is. It's become real to them rather than it be some highfalutin, unavailable thing for the either the scientists or the millionaires. This is something that everyday people can now understand and see, and we can have a play with it. But as you said earlier, very quickly, we can all see some of the limitations of it. If you go and ask ChatGPT what the year is, it'll tell you it's 2001, and it'll quickly get into an argument with you about that. And that's not that it's got a consciousness and it started to become irritated with you. It's because it's been trained on data that's actually very limited. And as long as we understand that, that's okay, because the answer is within the context of the training. One of the things that I think it's really done for us, though, I think made us believe that artificial intelligence and some of the applications of it can really be profoundly changing and add a lot of value to our businesses and our personal lives and the communities that we live. And I think people are wanting now to engage with it and embrace it and try it in a way that maybe a year ago it was still too far away. It's now within touch and distance. And it reminds me of, 10 years ago, I borrowed my brother's car and it had active cruise control on it and this lane control mechanism. I'd never seen it before. But I drove from Milton Keynes to Leeds and it was about 145 miles. And I drove there, although I'd put 70 miles an hour on, and during the 50s dropped it down to 50, it controlled the speed, it braked when cars came in front of me, it stayed in the lane. And it just instantly made me go, holy smoke, autonomous driving is going to happen. This isn't something of the future. This is coming. And I think ChatGPT has done some of that. It's made us all realise this thing's a lot closer and more real than maybe we thought it was previously.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And thinking about ChatGPT, as you say, I've been playing around with it and I get into arguments with it. Because I think it's great in a scary, I find it great in a scary way, the way the information it comes up with, scary due to the level of information and detail. But there's another type of scary that comes to play for me, is when I ask it some questions I didn't ask it about you. When I do ask it questions, sometimes it gives me answers that aren't accurate, but it does it with
Well,
such a confidence. As you might know, I've written a few books. I've written 3, and I asked it for books by Susan Popoola, and it listed 6 books, 2 of my own, 4 of other people, assuming they exist. And then I asked it the book that it missed out, My Male Perspectives on the Value of Women. It didn't include that. And so I asked it, who wrote Male Perspectives? And it gave me the name of someone else. Just imagine that person standing in front of you and you ask the person a question, and the person just confidently speaks, and you have no reason for believing it's not true. So I guess there is a need for caution with the information that it provides as well.
yeah. No, I 100% hear you and agree with you. One story that it makes me think of is 10 years ago, I was doing some homework with my daughter, and she needed to write an essay on a particular topic and asked me for my thoughts. And I started giving her my perspective on that particular issue. She'd already Googled it, and Google had told her what the answer was. And we ended up having a fight that ultimately left me walking away from helping her because Google told her what the answer was. And I was really struggling getting her to think about other perspectives, other angles, other sources. And so I think now for at least a decade, young people have gotten into the habit of being able to go to these sites, ask a question, and that is the answer. So yeah, it needs to come with a health warning. We need to all be aware these things are only as good as the algorithm that created it, as the training that's been done, as the data it's been fed. And we have no control in that. That's OpenAI's gift. When we start to create algorithms in our own companies for our own objectives, then we have a duty at that point to be able to make sure the data that we're using is complete, is accurate, and that the models that we're creating, that we test them, and that we make sure that they give accurate information, and ideally, that we publish that information with the answers that they're given, so that, if the model is only 50% sure, it's letting you know that when it gives you the answer.
And just thinking about AI from the perspective of Aiimi, and possibly beyond, but I'm focusing on Aiimi, how would you say leaders, people should truly leverage AI and make the most of it?
Well, I think right now our customers are very interested in driving efficiencies, in creating new experiences, both for their employees and customers. And we're trying to focus our energy on helping them and our expertise. But we are ultimately able to look internally and start to see opportunities to help ourselves too. And what we're doing is we're finding excuses or reasons to have a play with it internally. Okay, so I can give you an example. A non-contentious example would be when we're looking at our invoices and we're trying to collect cash, use an algorithm, an AI algorithm that will predict to us when that invoice is going to be paid by our customers, and give it lots of information, the historic information that we've got, allow it to then measure those accuracies, measure how it's going to work, and ultimately then fire that on the existing invoices we've got. And what that does is it allows our accounts payable team to focus in on the areas where we might have some problems, not necessarily on the things that are going to happen. So it gives you an opportunity to be efficient. That said, I think that we as leaders also need to be thinking about what we're going to use these algorithms for, and ethically, do we feel that that's the right thing to do? And in very recent times, I've talked to 2 different organizations that were both building a very similar model that was looking at undergraduates that were applying to go to university, were looking at what was the propensity for this person who was applying to actually successfully complete the course. one of those organizations was looking at that algorithm was so that they could disqualify or not offer a place to someone that had a high propensity for them to fail. The other one was looking at the algorithm so that they were able to offer different pathways to make sure that that person successfully completed the course. So there's some ethical questions that we've got to ask ourselves. And I think as companies like Aiimi, when we are asked by our customers to do certain things and build certain models, I think we are bound to challenge that and to make sure we're doing the right things for the right people and to live by our values and do things in the right way. So it's complex, and we're starting to, I think, feel that pressure because we're seeing some of the examples that you're talking about where, unintended bias has happened, that's caused problems. So how do we make sure we put some controls in place where we measure that and make sure we do the right thing?
That is important. I guess what you've described with that example is profiling, and
Yes.
two types of profiling. And we all know about the police and profiling. And there is what I think a lot of people see about negative profiling. But you're saying it can be used positively, and it can also be used to discredit people in a way that is not constructive. But just summing up on the AI, in many ways for me, it aligns to when you were talking about data, the work that you do around data. Because I guess sometimes there's a question that people have that you're responding to, and that's the starting point. But on other occasions, it's what are the possibilities, and it's exploring at that level. And would it be fair to say it's the same with AI? You either start with a question, you want to explore the possibilities.
Yeah, I think in the majority of cases, I'd say in probably over 90% of cases, there is a challenge that is causing inefficiency. It's maybe affecting customer satisfaction. There's an opportunity to do something better. And how can we put our data to work or leverage these new technologies to help us? So, and I think most of us enjoy that because it's quite tight and success is clear to us. But there are also lots of opportunities, particularly in R&D, where we're able to effectively build a model, a digital model of something, whether that be a submarine, an engine, a racing car, it could be angling water, it could be their pipe network. But if we're able to build a digital model of that, and we take lots of data, which could be how that thing was performing. For example, if it was an angling water network, we might be looking at the pressure in those pipes, the flow that's going through them. We might have loggers that are listening to the noise that's in there. We might have information about jobs that have been done, valves that are being turned on and off, things like weather, extreme weather, normal weather, rain flows, soil types, the way the pipes are made. All of that data can be put into models that we can then create effectively a digital version of it, and we can start using AI to find patterns that we are just not capable of spotting because all that data at once in our brains is mush. Whereas the model can start seeing it and identifying things that we can't see. And then an SME comes along and goes, holy smoke, now these set of circumstances happen. It can lead to this bad outcome. It can lead to this burst. And so we get a really good opportunity in terms of R&D now, where we can put these models to work. We can start stressing them out, testing them with new scenarios, testing hypotheses about what we do differently, and we see different outcomes in the digital world. Then through the R&D and testing and simulation, we can then do things differently in the physical world that gives a better outcome. So both ways of working are valid.
Yeah, both. Thank you for that. I'm just thinking, you've mentioned profiling and you've mentioned perspectives, and I'm aware that diversity is key to Aiimi, that you already have a diverse team, but you still want it to be much more diverse than it currently is. Why? I mean, because easy look. I mean, just you're a white man, and people could think, why does it matter to you?
Yeah, that's a good question, a big question, which I will attempt to answer. Diversity is really, really important, and it is overly used. Maybe a little bit, contentious, but I don't believe in diversity for diversity's sake, and I get quite annoyed when I see maybe a brochure that is not reflective of who we are as a company, and people trying to put images of people because they think that fits a certain look. I get really quite irritated with that. I genuinely feel that having a group of people that come from different walks of life, that come from different points of view, whether that's countries, religions, sexual orientation, it doesn't really matter to me. But having a different perspective, I think, adds richness and flavour and wonderful things. And when you spend time with people potentially from outside your norm, again, whether they're black, Asian, French, it doesn't really matter. You go and put yourself in that group and understand their point of view and their life and some of their values and meaning. You go from feeling like you're tolerating something to feeling like you're enriched and your life is better for being part of them. And so I've had 2 VP EMEA roles where I've had people in pretty much every country in Europe, Middle East and Africa. And I've learned how wonderful being around those people is and how rich it has made me feel. If I can bring that into Aiimi, one of the things that we do from a data point of view is we run hackathons. And hackathons are really all about getting a group of people into a room to collaborate and to try and solve a big idea. And what we found works very well is to have a mixed group of people that approach solving that particular problem in lots of different ways. If you're trying to build the next generation nuclear reactor, you don't want nuclear scientists that built Hinkley Point. If you're trying to figure out maybe a different way to solve leakage in the pipe network, you don't just want leakage experts that have been doing that 20 years. We actually want people from different walks of life, from different backgrounds to come in and work in a way that generates completely wacky innovation, new ideas, and it's often something that was unthinkable that can become a really great idea and solve that in a way that nobody would have thought of. So diversity for me, it's part of who I am. It's part of my family. It's part of my history. I've seen the value in that. But it's also in the workplace. It's an essential ingredient of innovation. So it's very important. Just touching back on my daughter's homework, my son, he did a course at college called Public Services, and it was really a course that would lend itself to becoming police officer. And one of the things that I learned in supporting him in his homework challenges was from the police force is in order for them to go and be an effective policing body, they need to be reflective of the community that they serve. And if they don't, that can become a problem because people don't recognise them as theirs. And I took quite a lot of learning from that. And one of the reasons why I mention that is I've set Aiimi a goal of having a diversity in our company that matches the community that we serve. So whilst we do look at ethnicity pay gaps, gender pay gaps, we look at the different mix of our teams, I want to compare that not to some technology average or to some company like Facebook or Google. I want to actually compare it to the mix that our customers have. And I think if we could at least get to represent them in the same way, I think that would be a great outcome. And I think, year on year we measure it, we get better and better at it. It's never good enough, but yes, it is important to me.
Yeah. And yet there are people that would say that doesn't matter. what's important is having people that are good at the job. What's wrong with having the same type of people that built Hinkley Point doing things today? That the important thing is that people get the job done, and that diversity, as you've described it, is just a distraction. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I just think that's very short-sighted. I think some of those people might form that view not because they really believe it, but because the challenge of becoming more diverse sometimes is much harder than they think. And rather than face that challenge and somehow overcome it, it's easier just to say, we're good enough as we are, let's just keep going. And, I definitely haven't completed this journey. We're far from it. And as you know, I've been uncomfortable at times when I look at our company and I wish it was a lot more diverse than it is. But instead of looking at it through that lens and going, well, we've got great people, they've applied in their own right, they're great at what they do, I don't think that is right, because I think that there's opportunities to improve and come up with new ideas and new ways of working and new ideas for our customers that we're missing. And so my approach to it is, first of all, let's get the data, let's understand where we want to get to and where we are. But let's try and find ways of presenting our company that looks like it's somewhere where maybe other people that currently don't work with us would like to come. Market ourselves and take time to present the company that makes it attractive. And let's understand, different places that we can go and make our company and our brand and our people more visible, so that people then, again, would like to come and apply. So we've done quite a lot of work in that area. We're also looking at measuring, kind of go further down and start to measure the mix of people that are applying for roles. And is there anything there that we can do that maybe we're not doing? Or maybe there's some things that we're doing, with various elements of bias that we can start to capture and measure and see that currently we can't.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just thinking, one of the great things is I've met a few members of your team. From those that I speak, they do speak positively of the organisation as a great place to work. Yet, I'm sure that in addition to this comfort that you may at times feel, because it's not as diverse as you ideally want it to be, the journey to becoming diverse and things that people might throw back at you might at times be uncomfortable in their own right. And I'm just wondering, is there one key thing that you would highlight for other leaders embarking on that journey to say, this is what I do that enables me to better navigate through on my journey?
Is that specifically to do with improving diversity? Is that question?
Yeah.
That is a great question. I think that within our company, many years ago, we found our own dedicated recruiter rather than using agencies. And she passionately believes in equality and fairness, and feels like she wants to find people from different walks of life, maybe that have not had opportunities or doors slammed in their face. And so she's brought us avenues, pots of resources, companies that are striving to open those doors for the people. And she's been an advocate of that. And through her energy, we've tried and experimented with it, and almost every time been successful. We've created a community in the company, a D&I community, that doesn't have any corporate kind of responsibility. It's a team of people that have come together on their own will, with their own ideas. And I've seen my job is to fan the flames of that team, not to dictate anything, not to put any rules or boundaries around it, to actually give them time away from their work so they can contribute to it. What I've seen is that empowerment and that belief in them has led to an energy and a movement and change that I wouldn't have been able to do on my own. But it's also led to a feeling of pride in the company by everybody else who sees that going on and feels really happy that they work for a company that does and cares about those things. So back to your one thing of advice is I promote those communities of purpose to come together, let them do their thing and let them get on with it and get out of the way, and believe in them and support them.
Thank you. I'm conscious of time. The two key things I just want to touch on, if that's okay. I mean, you're very public about being a mental health awareness advocate. And I'm just interested in why, because I know you also host a mental health support group for young men called Man Cave in Milton Keynes. From your perspective, why is mental health so important both to you that makes you an advocate and most especially for young men?
Yeah, good question. I one story that I'd like to share with you is when I was, I think, 29. So in that first startup that I mentioned earlier, I'd created this company. We were 2 years in. We got up to about 20 people. I was currently working with HBoss in Halifax at the time. And I genuinely was, I think, the happiest human on the planet. I was buzzing, working late, long days, often weekends. I was part of a fun team that went out every night, drinking heavily, eating great meals and whatnot. And it was super, super fun. But at the same time, and really unbeknownst to me, I kept finding myself going to the doctors because I was getting weird and wonderful symptoms that I thought meant I was about to have a heart attack. Again, I didn't really understand why. I assumed there was some medical thing that was going on. And I kept that quiet, and I found myself a couple of times driving out of the car park at work to A&E, thinking if I was about to have a heart attack, then at least if I had it in the car park, that I'd be nearby and, I could be saved. And that seemed a sensible thing. But I also had been to my GP and they'd given me tests after tests, ECG, blood tests, whatnot. Consistently advice was eat less, drink less, work less, and do more exercise. Every time I came out having got that advice, and it wasn't the kind of physical, medical problem that was with me, I thought they were idiots. Until one time, the GP gave me a card and it said, I'd suggest that you go and speak with this person. I think they could help you. And I looked at the card and it was a psychotherapist. And I was absolutely appalled with the doctor. And I went home and spoke to my partner in disgust. And she begged me to go and see this person and kind of told me what a pain I've become and how my behaviour was, distracting the family, keeping her awake at night. And I'd realised that it had got out of control. So I did go and, after a few weeks, book that appointment. And it was a life-changing experience for me. I'm an engineer, mathematician, in my kind of heart of hearts. And listening to this expert was able to connect challenges that I was having mentally with physical manifestations of that, and I could see how one was related to the other. I was also, learned some techniques around coping with, anxiety, and when those things happened, even simple things like being able to breathe and learning some techniques that meant when it happened again, instead of panicking and spiraling to want to get in the car and drive somewhere, I knew I was going to be able to get through it, and within 5 or 10 minutes I'd be okay. And just by knowing that means, it becomes much more manageable. And so I was able to, within a short amount of time, overcome that. I have a tool bag of stuff that would protect me in the future. And I also did change my diet and my drinking and my work and my sleep and my exercise. So it kind of led me to become a more healthy, physically healthy person. And, I was very comfortable with telling my team. I don't know, it dawned on me, I remember when I was a graduate, one of my managers, a manager at the time, he did a leaving do, did a speech, and was at the bar, and at the end of that speech, he said to me, "Oh my God, that was so stressful, I need a drink." And I remember looking at him thinking, "Oh, you're this like super senior manager, why are you stressed?" He just kind of let that out the bag, and it kind of just tallied up with me that we're programmed to hide these things and not talk about it, and yet there I am getting help, speaking to someone that helps people every day. So I felt this was my moment to press the brave button, and be more public about it. And so I've decided one of the best gifts that I can give to all of the young people that are coming into our company is to share my story, is to let them know that that's what happened and that these are the tools and the help that we can get out there, but also to then make them available. And what I've learned over the years is the story's one thing, having a Bupa policy with physical and mental health services is another, but we've actually led us to a policy where we've said anybody in the company, for either themselves or their family, they can go and get a counsellor, any kind of therapy that they need, and expense that to the company, and no questions will ever be asked. And my view is that if we can, do things that are positive like that, signpost people to get help early enough, that it'll be in their interest, in their family's interest, and in the company's interest to do so. And genuinely, we're talking small. This is small beer in terms of dollars. It's a tiny amount of money in the big scheme of things, that potentially, not exaggerating, can save lives. So for me, it's just an obvious thing to want to do. And I might have felt brave the first time I did it, but now I feel like it's a very wonderful and good thing to do. I don't feel uncomfortable in the slightest.
Yeah, right. Thank you. And thank you for sharing internally and sharing publicly as well. I mean, from everything I hear says that men aren't encouraged to share their emotions and how they feel. And I think the workplace can be a place, generally, whatever your gender is, where you're not encouraged to share. So I think it's a great thing that you've moved forward from that place where you were struggling, but also that you're sharing so publicly as well. Thank you very much. Finally, can I ask, how can people contact you or connect with you?
So my LinkedIn profile, that's a really easy way to go and connect or send me an email. My email address at Aiimi is ssalvin@aimi.com. Be happy for anyone to reach me directly on that.
Thank you. And just to state the obvious for most people, Salvin is spelt Salvin.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Thank you very much for being on the Leading the Mosaic World podcast, Steve. I've really, really enjoyed and gained so much from the conversation with you.
No, thank you, Susan. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for everything you've done for Aiimi and the support that you've been giving us. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and a pleasure to do the podcast with you today.
Likewise. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Leading in the Mosaic World podcast. Do visit our website at www.mosaicworld.live to find out more about what we do and how we can be of support to you. Alternatively, connect with me, Susan Popoola, spelt Popoola, on LinkedIn, and let me know what you think of the podcast. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, give it a first-class rating, and tell everyone you know all about it. Thank you.